when you were starting and you were in UPW, I guess you probably were with Cena and Joe at the same time, right?
Yeah. So, I started with a wrestling organization called APW, All Pro Wrestling, up in Northern California. After I had about a year of matches under my belt, I went and did some stuff for LA, and I did some stuff for XPW and UPW. And what actually caused me to go to UPW was I sent my tape in to WWE, and they gave me a return phone call, and it was Bruce Pritchard, and he had told me that, and I'll never forget the words. I think it'd be in your best interest to go to Los Angeles and get on Rick Bassman's card. And I said, okay. So I called up Rick Bassman, who I never talked to before, and right then and there he put me on his card, and I went down, and that's when I did some shots with XPW and UPW, and that's when I met Samoa Joe. Funny story about John Cena was I was wrestling John when I went in there. My third. He was my third match. John was my third match. I had worked Mike Bell twice. Mad Dog Mike Bell, rest in peace, who's no longer with us. I worked him twice, and then I worked John Cena my third match. And when I got to LA, I wanted to look strong. I wanted to be ready for the night, so I went to Gold's Gym over in Venice, which I'd never been to before. Cause I'm like, oh, let me do a little sightseeing and, let me kill some time. So I go over to Venice Beach and Gold's Gym over in Venice Beach. And I walk up to this guy and I'm like, I gotta get really strong because I got a match tonight. And, I want to look really good. What do you recommend? And the guy was like, oh, I recommend this stuff over here. And I said, oh, okay, cool. And he said, you got a match tonight? And I said, yeah. He goes, that's funny. I wrestle too. And I said, oh, what's your name? And he said, John Cena. And I said, oh, wow. I said, I'm going to be wrestling you like in a couple days. And
Nice.
he said, oh, wow. But that's how I met John Cena. And then I ended up seeing him again later that night at the Galaxy Theater in Huntington Beach, where we did the show. And I worked Mike Bell that night. But yeah, my first time meeting John Cena was at Gold's Gym. I think I saw a WWE video of him where he had talked about working at Gold's Gym. And that's the truth, because that's where I met him.
Wow, it's so interesting though. It's like, oh shit, I know that name. I'm wrestling you, and
Right,
like
right.
what a weird way to meet him. Yeah.
Yeah, at the time, he said his name, Rick Bassman had told me I'm working a guy named Prototype. So,
Yep.
no, John Cena, nobody knew who John Cena was or what a John Cena was. So that name did not ring a bell anywhere at that, in 1999, I think it was, right? So, when he kind of introduced himself and he was like, he told me he was, they call me Prototype John Cena. And that's when I was like, oh, I'll be wrestling you because, I talked to Rick Bassman about wrestling you when I came down. So yeah, funny story about that. So another funny side story was when I had to go from another Rick Bassman show, when I had to go to catch an airplane, Joe was going to take me to the airport. So when Joe was going to take me to the airport, John Cena said he needed a ride too to go, I guess, home or go someplace. So it's me, Joe, and John Cena, and we're on the freeway trying to get to the airport. And as we're trying to get to the airport, I'm just like, oh, it's taking a little while. It's taking so long. And Joe was like, LAX, right? And I said, no, John Wayne International. So Joe just kind of takes his pickup. It was like a pickup truck or something. It was like it was like truck or an SUV type thing. And he took it like over this barricade, just crossed these dividers and just went in the other direction. And I remember John Cena just like screaming, Joe, 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 just screaming. And it's just funny when you think about the guys involved. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
it's just a funny story that now when you look back on it.
That's crazy. Where
Yeah.
Joe ended up and obviously where Cena ended up. It's just crazy to think of their beginnings when John Cena is that young. Some people be like, "Oh, I knew he was a star all along," but did you see that from him? To like, "Oh, this guy's going to be a huge star," or it was just another wrestler to you?
There was something about John. He did not have the charisma. He didn't have the talk and all that stuff. But he did have the body. So he was a young guy and he had this body on him. And I mean, I'll say this much: ever since I knew him, ever since I met him, WWE had their eye on him. Because when I talked to Rick Bassman about doing my first show, he said, "I'm gonna put you in there with this guy, Prototype." WWE is really high on him. He's only had one match. So I think I came in. I think I was John's second or third match, and I just remember Rick Bassman telling me WWE was really high on him. I'm like, God, he's only had like 2 or 3 matches, and they already know who he is. So yeah, they had their eye on him. As far as I know, they've had their eye on him since the moment he took his first bump.
What do you think about that? The extra pressure on you? They're like, oh wow, they got their eye on him. Well, that means they're going to have their eye on me. I better have a good match.
Yes, that's how I thought going into it. I thought like, okay. And plus, I had Bruce Pritchard telling me, I think it's in your best interest. We liked your video. We saw you in Beyond the Mat. I think it would be in your best interest to go down there